emotions start to form in my emotion. Time has come to grab and lead us back to dust. To everyone who saw the message, it's over now. You've made your passage, laid down.
Happy New Year, everyone. I'm really happy to have you back on the Open Mic Podcast. Today I'm with the Steadyfire band. They are super cool, and I'm really happy to have you guys back. How are you doing today?
We are so wonderful. Hello. Into the mic this time. We're
Into
good.
The mic. You're good. I'm joined today by all four of you now. Gavin, Jade, Garrett, and Nick. The three boys have been on here before at last year's podcast. Super cool. Hope you guys check that one out. Today we're going to be talking about a album, their debut record, correct?
Yes.
And the name of that record is How
Often Have I Been This Wrong?
Yes, I'm so sorry. Thank you. And it's cool because last time we talked about the title track as a single, not the solo. Sorry.
Even if we're the same. We talked about Even If We're the Same and played 1967, and we were kind of scrambling at that point. In fact, there's a lot of stuff has happened between the last time we were on and now, even though we were announcing the same album. A lot happened.
And I'm excited to get into that. And so we're recording this on January 3rd, but it will be published after the album is released, which is on not April 9th. It says April 1st on your SoundCloud.
Yeah, that's that SoundCloud link will never go public. That was a review stream.
I see.
So I set that up the night the album was mastered.
I gotcha.
It was 2 a.m. And when I was trying to put in 1/4/18, I put 4/1/18, so it reads as April 1st on the SoundCloud, but
gotcha.
It is definitely coming out
on the
January 4th.
That's
April
exciting.
Fools.
So
April Fools.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Do you have anything that you want to sort of just get the conversation started with?
First off, how dare you start off the podcast with a voice memo? That I recorded.
I sort of thought you'd get a kick out of it.
It was hilarious.
I think so too. Yeah.
But now I kind of have to explain what that is. So that isn't Steadyfire. When I was 17, I recorded an album called Happy Birthday Misery, and there was there was kind of this interlude that would play several times throughout the album, and for that January, after the album had come out on September 22nd, that was in a period where there wasn't like a solid Steadyfire lineup, and I was kind of concerned as to whether or not we'd bounce back from kind of the rough 2017 we'd had. So on January 2018, I was supposed to release an EP called Happy New Year, Everyone. That was supposed to cap off Happy Birthday Misery, and I canceled it the night before, and never really said anything about it again, except that it would come out when it was finished, which it never came out. And I actually took a lot of the lyrical themes from it, and that's what became How Often Have I Been This Wrong. But I kept getting these messages from people asking me whether or not they would ever hear kind of how that concluded. So that was on New Year's Eve, I posted that. It was the voice memo demo from the memo demo. I need to say that more often. Voice memo demo of the song Happy New Year. And I actually got this picture sent to me by a guy in the UK who follows us, is a really good friend of mine, and he had taken the cover art for the EP before I was able to take it down, and he has just been having it on his computer waiting for the day a song would come out from it so that he could finally have that part of his collection complete. So he sent me a picture of his media player with the artwork and artist and song, and just why are you saving this voice memo that I posted a link from my Google Drive onto my Facebook?
I think that it is just sort of crazy that you guys have sort of fans in other countries, and maybe you guys have just sort of grown to accept it or whatever. There's another musician that I know in town named Taj Torrance, who recently moved down to Atlanta, and he tweeted about how sort of hard it is for him to consider the people who listen to his music as fans, because it makes him feel sort of I don't know how to describe what he feels, but it makes him feel weird, I guess, and
Yeah.
like maybe like too much of a superstar. And I think he's humble or whatever you want to call it. Like he's just a good person. How do you guys handle that?
I'm kind of a tyrant with our social media because of some problems that happened back in 2016 or whatnot. And I'm so insecure about that I kind of got really used to talking as Steadyfire in kind of a first person. So I'm always making posts as a we and everything. And I try to represent the band the best I can. But because the music's so personal to me, I just have to handle it with that direct communication in mind. So because of that, and because all of our platforms are so one-on-one with everybody, and I try to be so open and transparent on them, and just how often I post pictures of all of us together, and just how, I mean, we've spent so much time together since we became this lineup, and we're about to spend so much more, a ridiculous amount. So it's hard to consider people I don't know, fans. You can call it whatever you want, but we try to just have a friendly, open relationship with anybody that listens to the music. I've always been really interested in what kind of connects people and what keeps people separate. And I always thought of, making music this personal as maybe an ability to reach out and bridge that gap. If you look up the album on our Bandcamp account, which kind of gives us more room to have liner notes in the digital era, because that's something, whenever I get an album, I'm opening it up and I'm reading who the band is thinking, and everybody that worked on the album, and like their personal notes. That's really important to me, so I wanted to keep that alive in the digital medium, and I think that it's great that platforms let us do that. But in there, I talk more about how anyone who's listened to the album now shares something in common with us. No matter how different we seem, there is that physical connection. And I think that's important.
Well, I'm interested in hearing what you all think. I feel like thinking of them more as friends or whatever, even if you haven't met, but just like thanking them and admiring them from a distance makes you as an organization, a band, a group, more accessible. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
I want it to feel family-esque.
Yeah.
I don't want to pry into anyone else's life, but, being in the social sphere like that makes you really open, and I try to just embrace that. And, there's a certain point that you have to pull back and not share too much, but anyone who tries to contact us does contact us, and whether that's on a public forum like Twitter, which has become a much better way to get in touch with us since our last time we spoke. And I think that all of our social medias are so much more active now. And I think we've just gotten a lot better at having real meaningful conversations with people.
Well, that seems pretty difficult for a lot of musicians that I've had on the show before. I'm excited for us to chat either on the air or off the air about how you guys have been able to be successful at that, because I know that especially in Richland County, it's not a very Twitter-heavy place. So I think connecting with people. I mean, I realize you guys are doing it on more than just this county, but it's interesting to me. It will be interesting to me to hear how you guys have done that.
Well, I'm happy to talk about any of it, and as soon as I figure out how we've had any success whatsoever, I will be so happy to share.
All right, I'll hold you to it. Next to you is Jade, who was not on the show the last time we spoke, and I heard we talked about you. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but I just tell us a little bit about yourself.
I don't know.
Well,
I came down here for a visit to record an EP with Gavin for a different band that we're in. We're in a two-piece called Quick Choices.
Yeah.
And I was supposed to be here for like 3 weeks, and then I never left. So now I live here.
That seems like quite the commitment.
Yeah.
You were in Columbus,
Yeah,
right?
I lived in Columbus. I had just finished school, and I was taking a year off, and I had just quit my job because it was awful. So I really didn't have any
Respect.
ties. Yeah, Garrett and I quit our jobs at the same time, actually.
At Subway.
I didn't have any ties in Columbus, and so I had made a joke about not wanting to be at home, and Gavin was like, "You don't have to leave," and I was like, "You're right. I'm an adult, and I can totally move here," and I did it. And then 3 weeks after that, sometime in September, he was like, "Do you want to be in Steadyfire?" And I was like, "Yes. I would love to be in an alternative rock band. Get out of here. That's the dream." So now here I am,
Well, awesome.
doing interviews and talking.
Yeah,
because
well,
I'm in a band.
Congratulations on the newfound adulthood. That's impressive. Do you guys have anything that you guys wanted to say before let me start over. We're going to listen to one of the songs on the album. Do you guys have anything you want to say about the record as a whole before we get into it?
Oh man. What a process.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm just gonna open up this floor to anyone who's not me, and I'll talk last because I'm pretty sure if I start talking about this now,
Yeah,
no one else will
you'll
be allowed to
rant.
talk.
You'll
Yeah.
rant. I know you will.
My head's spinning already.
It was a process. I mean, to think like, me, Nick, and Gavin, we didn't even like have like any kind of practice session until April 20th. And
Yeah, I remember you guys telling me that.
yeah,
That's crazy to me.
And then within the same year we recorded an album. It all happened really quick.
It was like
But-
4 months later.
Yeah.
The first revision of the album was done.
Yeah.
Because we recorded this album in its almost entirety, twice?
Yeah, and then we
Times.
Yeah.
re-recorded the whole thing like a couple months ago because of me.
Well, and we were doing, at least on my part of it, we were doing like transitional pieces to go like for the intro. Then there's one in the middle. And then there's one at almost the end that we were adding back in. And Gavin's just like, the drums sound so much better on these 3 recordings. Let's just redo everything.
I
Okay.
admire that a lot about the album because I listened to the whole thing. You sent it to me early. The transitions and the flow from the moment of impact all the way down to fragments is very easy to get through. And I remember that you told me that you wanted your very first album that got like cut in half due to expenses when you were recording. You weren't able to fully tell the story. And so I'm interested in talking to you specifically about sort of the intertwined story that this record has.
Yeah, the very first time I tried recording this album was 2015. So what you're referring to there is the first Steadyfire EP, which I mean is literally 3 songs. And that was 2 sessions in the studio in Cleveland. And then we recorded 2 more singles. I guess it was only me, like looking at the people in this room. 2 more singles in 2016, and then no songs in 2017. We recorded one towards the beginning of the year, and it didn't get released until the beginning of 2018. So like when you look at like our list of like things released this year, it's a huge list because so it's like Your Father the Captain, 1967, Even If We're the Same, Speak Softly, Everything, and then this whole album. So I mean, I didn't sleep this whole year. I feel like at this moment, I guess the last year, 2018. What year is it? It's 2019.
It's 2019,
now.
dude.
Unless,
What a hell
like,
of a way to kick off the year.
This year is. I need sleep. You talk about the transition of this album. We're talking being up 48 hours straight, working on transitions and deleting them and making new ones and then trying it out and then calling them at 2 p.m. going, hey, I haven't slept in a day, but I have this idea and you need to be here now.
Right.
And then they would come and do that, and then that being good would cause us to re-record 2 other things. So it's like when we talked in October, we were revealing the album, and the initial plan, just now that we can be entirely honest, was to reveal that single and then reveal another single a week later and another single a week later, and we were just going to keep going. And at the last minute, we realized only one of these songs is good.
So it sounds like there were some pains in terms of making this album complete.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like, we didn't get it right until December.
Okay.
We were supposed to be done in September, and we were done, and that was what we were announcing. And then from the time that we talked the first time, we re-recorded everything on the album but 2 songs. So that being our first single, and then a song called Hands is the very original version that we recorded on July 23rd. I kept a log of the entire album, so I have all these dates in my head. Like, I know that I wrote the title track, How Often Have I Been This Wrong, on August 13th, and then started recording it the next day. And it's just, that's how the album went. We would record a version of it, and then we would kind of like cyclically go back and re-record it. And it took so many revisions. I consider there being 5 versions of this album just in 2018. I mean, if you talk to Nick, because he had to re-record his drums in whole twice, there could be 2 versions. I made Garrett re-record all of his bass probably 3 or 4 times, and I worked on guitar from the first day of recording to the last day.
So just to make sure that I'm hearing you correctly, though, you said that Hands was the original version of which song?
Hands is the original version of Hands, but it's the
okay.
only song on the album that we recorded
didn't
one
change.
time and didn't change. We
I see.
started
Okay.
recording it on July 23rd, first day of recording, and that original drum track is the same. In fact, it's the only song on the whole album that was recorded in the summer.
Okay, I gotcha.
That was actually also the only song that I had heard before I got here.
Yeah, seriously, that song predates the rest of the album by so much unintentionally, because it's all one long set of sessions running for months, us doing it entirely on our own, me engineering the album and mixing it. It's in our space. So, I mean, before she was even in Steadyfire, I was having her critique mixes of that song.
Yeah.
In fact, the final mix of the song is the final version she got sent before she joined the band. And then we kind of kept working on the rest of the album. And it still flows in the album really well, because I went back and made sure that transition worked and fitted into the album right. And we wrote it. It was the second song that we wrote on the very first day that we got on stage. So literally we got on stage together, except for Jade, on April 20th. And that was the day we started writing the album. It was supposed to be a tryout.
I see.
And we started writing the album on that day.
Yeah.
And
we wrote 2 full songs at practice. One of them didn't make it onto the album yet because we still have to finish it.
Yeah, there's
and
I don't
refine
get.
it, but-
Sometimes I'm not happy with things, and I'll just at the last minute be like, "That song we finished, we're taking it off," and then we wrote 2 more songs to take its place. So this album is so hard for me to consider done right now, even though it's done. It's been done for weeks, like final, like no one can touch it. It's just, I feel like I've been working on this for 4 years, because the oldest song on the album is Fragments. I started writing that when I was 15, and I'm 19 now.
Wow.
So this album is like a very long commitment finally all coming together. And the fact that this album was able to be written in the most part from April to August by this group of people is, I don't know, I'm very emotionally wrapped up in it. I'm really lucky.
Well, I know that I promised that we would play a song, but I have one more question before we get there. Considering that this is a 4-year project, talk to me a little bit about what you've learned as a musician in those 4 years, and that you think have really excelled on this record in comparison to when you were doing your first EP at 15.
So the songs on that first EP were written because we started recording that in like February of 2015 in a professional studio. I wrote those songs when I was 14. And my whole idea of music and what I want to do and what you can accomplish with music is so incredibly different now. It's changed so much. My goals as an artist are so different, because I feel like really early on my we're just not going to talk about this, but so the people listening to this podcast are going to be
She has a
really
cat
Got a
in her
confused.
cat in
shirt.
her jacket.
I understand what's happening.
Like, there's an actual cat?
Yeah,
Yeah.
wait till she turns. She's got a cat like zipped up in her jacket.
Nick, describe for our listeners what she has in her shirt.
It's a cat.
All right.
A little fluff ball.
Nicely done. Nicely done. Okay. No, but I am interested in hearing this. So if you wouldn't
Yeah,
mind
okay,
continuing.
so, I was 15, and we recorded that live, and that lineup even hadn't been together all that long. I was just trying to learn things, and, God, I can't. This is a weird day.
I wish my cats would ride around in my jacket.
I so wish there was a video to go along with this. No, but
year.
yeah, the very first version of this album, I wrote it kind of in a notebook when I was 15, and it was called Light and Dark, and Fragments was the first song.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that's been rewritten so many times. I have no idea what the hell I've learned, but
Okay.
there's an album now and there wasn't one then. and we did it a lot faster, even though it took a lot of months. But I'll tell you what I learned for the next album.
Okay.
I am not producing it.
That's
We
fair.
are not doing it the same way again. And we can talk towards the end about plans for the next album because
Yeah.
honestly, I feel comfortable not keeping secrets with people. I mean, we can talk openly about what our plans for 2019 are because this year is going to be loaded. But I guess let's jump into this album because it's finally out.
Yeah, let's celebrate that. Can we play Like Before?
Yeah.
That's probably my favorite song on it.
I thought you were gonna take those hi-hat hits out.
Step through the doorframe, let the cool air on my face while you put on your ball cap. Let us know you own this place, and I can see it, hardly feel it. The way you discriminate, I didn't know we had that ability to hate. So hold me down.
How much fun is the chorus in the song?
There is a little track on my computer called The Crack from Hell where I had a really aggressive voice crack in the chorus. So every time we play it live now, I just have this eternal fear of that. So
That's fair.
not.
No, really?
No, it's one of the most fun courses on the album, but I gotta not get too into it or
I
else.
see. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
She doesn't love you, and you'll never be saved because there's no saving, there's no haven unless we do it ourselves. And there's no grace for you and I or anyone else. So hold me down, hold me to the floor, 'cause I don't feel like I know here anymore, and I can't breathe. I can breathe. Hold me down, 'cause I don't know here like before.
So these are one of the transitions that you guys worked on?
Yeah. I got lucky on that one, though.
Oh, yeah? What do you mean?
Well, I didn't have to work too hard on it. I knew what I wanted, and
Feedback is cool.
the feedback just happened to work exactly how I wanted it to the first time.
Okay, cool.
Um,
that is nice.
So, you get things that sometimes things are serendipitous and sometimes things are not. That one, I feel that most of the best ones on the album were the easiest ones, and the ones that I worked the hardest ones are kind of the ones no one's talking about. And I can't even complain because they're not the ones I want to listen to either. It's those ones where it's just like a guitar rains out or there's random screaming, or it can be any of those things.
Yeah, I gotcha. Is there anything that you would like to say about the song, or do you just want me to dive in with questions?
Well, There's an overarching story on the album.
Right.
I remember in your original article, you said that we were ready after a year of secrecy. We were ready to open up just a little bit, and there's a lot of work got put into making How Often Have You Been This Raw, both kind of a personal story or an allegory, or maybe talk about my life while also simultaneously being written from the perspective of somebody that's not me, a character I made. It's very much like a collection of short stories to me, while also being one longer one. I've gotten notes that I wrote down where every song is a chapter, kind of in this little fictional book that I have, and it's outlined that way. And every time that I would shift songs around just a little bit, I would have to rewrite the lyrics slightly to make it fit with the song that came before it and after it, and that's where a lot of the kind of cyclical nature of recording this album happened, where every time we'd record it, we'd get a little bit better and we'd change something, and we'd love that change so much we'd go back and record it. But this is one of those songs, I think this song and Even If We're the Same are the ones that kind of poke out of the story the most, where it just kind of breaks from the story a little bit and I just rant. So this is a ranting song. I would maybe consider it the third in a trilogy of ranting songs. It kind of starts with a Steadyfire single in 2016. That one's just nonsense. But this one is definitely the most political song on the album. I think listening to it would probably be obvious, if you had that in mind, talking about prejudice and hate and, again, going on those themes of what connects us and what separates us. It's despite it being nowhere near the most aggressive song on the album, it's probably the most sarcastically hateful. I think that I was the most upset writing this song. People kept trying to sell me MAGA hats, and I got really pissed.
Gotcha.
And so I wrote that.
I see. Do you because I'm a storyteller, I write stories for a living. They're just true stories, real life stories.
They're the most interesting ones.
Certainly can be. Other times it's city council.
Yeah, sometimes it depends where you're looking.
Right, but when they're stories about you all, they are interesting. But what I like to do when I write songs and stuff, my first EP was sort of a arcing story about a love. It was sort of falling in and out of love, right?
Was that the one that you showed me on Spotify?
One of the songs was, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that is really good.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. That's very nice of you. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that you and I are alike in that regard, I think, because your whole album sort of
I would say so.
Yeah. What are you trying to get the audience to reflect upon or think about throughout this whole album? Or when it's over, what do you hope that they got out of it?
I think people have a tendency to project their problems onto other people, and maybe their faults and mistakes onto other people. If the album is anything to me personally, it's learning to take blame, while also learning not to be too critical in that regard. So it's kind of a healthy balance between things and how that all balances out. And I try to express that through this larger story of, on Fragments, the kind of album loops around to a car crash. So in my head, as I'm writing this album, I've got this narrator who is kind of living their life in reverse while leading back to Fragments and then the moment of impact. The title specifically. So when I look at this album, you can perceive. It's been really interesting hearing different people's interpretations of the album as they listen to it, because you can specifically, and I wrote it so that the listener gets an emotional attachment in a way that they are projecting their own life into it. I wanted to pull back just enough to let people project their own feelings and life and emotion into it, so that it was their story as much as it was mine, in an effort to kind of connect people, show our similarities as opposed to our differences.
When you do talk to people and they give you their idea of what it's about, does it match what you were hoping they would get out of it? Or have you found that it's a little different? Or?
It's different for everybody. I mean, even the band, we've all had conversations. Both Nick and Garrett have separately came to me with different songs asking what they were about while also offering their own interpretation. And I can't. They're right. Whether they were what I saw or not, they're right, because as soon as you release something and put it out into the world, it now belongs to the world as much as it belongs to you. You got to originate something. You got to, whether inspiration comes from the world around us or it just kind of comes through us, however that works, and I don't know how it works, but I feel like none of this is mine. I feel like I got lucky enough to tell stories that kind of just existed. And I got my chance to put my own kind of lens on it. And I did that through kind of a short fictional story that I wrote. Like a short story version of this album exists, and I broke it up to write songs. So to me, like when you listen to The Moment of Impact, it is a character already not living, reflecting on life, or maybe on the edge of that. And it directly follows Fragments. Even though on the album you're talking about track 1 and track 10, to me, there's a sound that happens at the end of Fragments that also happens at the beginning of The Moment of Impact that makes it so that the album can play in a complete loop and never stop. And that's very intentional. And when people have listened to the album a bunch of times, one of the kind of like Easter eggs of the album is me saying, start the album on Fragments and end the album on How Often Have I Been This Wrong. And if you do that, How Often Have I Been This Wrong is very much a closer.
I'm going to school for music production now because of Gavin. Because I watch him in the garage suffering as he tries to produce this album, because there's so many tracks that we have, and then we re-record things, and then so there's new things and we have to add effects, and it's just a whole big process. And he spends like hours, like days in the garage just like mixing stuff. And he also spends days changing his lyrics. And so I before was the only one who knew the lyrics when we like are in band practice. The only one who knows the lyrics because Gavin forgets them because
you
he
might
has
still be the only one.
Probably because he rewrites them so much that he just has like 20 versions of the songs in his head. He just flip-flop in between them. But now he has changed some of my favorite lyrics in some of our songs, and I don't know what they are anymore. And so I get really upset every time because I'm trying to sing along, and they're just wrong. But and he thinks that he says that they're better, which I guess they're fine. It makes the story flow better. But
she's upset that
I'm upset.
So many religious references.
I'm just upset because they were good lyrics. But because I've been there, so like when he makes the change, you know, it might not be as noticeable to Nick or Garrett because they only see him, you know, when we have band practice or like things like this. But I sat there through all of the mixing and all of the changes that he made, even if he changed like one word. And so everything, I'm like right behind Gavin on his level of like, he knows every single little detail because I've watched him change all of these little tiny details. So it makes the album feel so like personal because it's like such a process. It was really difficult to like get everything together into a way that made Gavin happy. Because I mean, I don't know that much about producing right now. So he'll show me something. I'm like, yeah, that sounds good. And he goes, no, the levels are wrong. I'm like, I don't know. I'm sorry. Like for a long time, Nick's drums, I guess, sounded bad, but I couldn't tell because I don't know anything about this stuff. And that was a big process. So it's really interesting to be gaining that education through my schooling. And then so I will eventually understand these things. But right now I just like am picking up on what's wrong and what's right through watching Gavin do everything. So.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a cool sort of apprenticeship, if you will.
Yeah.
That's really awesome. Do you guys have a song that you guys want to talk about that we listen to first? A favorite song?
Oh, man.
Speak Softly is my favorite to play.
Okay, let's talk about that one then. We'll listen to it, or do you want to say something before that?
I just think it's really fun to play. Like, it's probably my favorite drum track that we've recorded or written. It just flows really well. It's a really fun song, and it was actually one of the most challenging to write for because there's a couple of really weird timing changes.
Yeah, that just kind of got brought to us one day.
That was the dream one, right?
Yeah, that was.
Yeah.
Gavin told us he literally dreamt about this song.
Wow.
Like every single part of it.
Every single part of it, and we ended up playing it exactly according to how he had like heard it.
Yeah, he's that level of crazy.
I mean, I have to. So I guess if we're going to play Speak Softly, I do have to. And it's the reason why I get so rambly is because of the fact that every time I think about one specific part of this album, it reminds me of 4 different things in the process and in the writing process. And I hope to be, maybe someday we'll be here talking about an album that I didn't have to record, engineer, mix, master every single part of, because it feels like if there's one single thing wrong with the album somebody complains about, I had my hands on it somewhere along that way, so it becomes my fault. So I've really become a nervous wreck around this album. But when I was talking earlier about how I felt like the creativity wasn't just mine, like it was being channeled or something, like Speak Softly is a good example of that, and this has happened to me a lot of times. It happened several times on this album, but this was the one time where it was so clear that it was kind of scary. Was I took a nap in the middle of working on the album, dreamt this entire song, a version of the lyrics and all, and the lyrics on the song are as close to as I can remember from the dream. I just had this whole 5-minute long song, and I went down and learned it on guitar immediately, and Garrett and Nick were already coming over to work on another song, and I said, we're going to stop what we were doing. I know that you don't know what's going on here, but I need you to write parts to this right now.
The mass confusion just waved over both of us.
It sounds like flexibility is one of your guys' strengths.
Oh
Yeah.
Like, it has to be.
Because I'm crazy.
Yeah, like that day, I very vividly remember that day because I don't remember what song we were going to be recording, but I walked into the garage thinking we were going to track a new song today, and Gavin's sitting there on his guitar, and I heard it outside the garage before I walked in. I'm like, okay, that's kind of weird. And he's sitting there on a chair in front of his amp. He looks up at me and he goes, "Hey, we're not recording today." "Oh, yeah, we're writing a song." "All right." So we sat down and wrote it.
How do you quote unquote write a song as a band together? Do you show off your guitar part and song lyrics as well in the first try? And then you let them sort of build on from there, or what's that process like?
I don't think we have a song that starts with anything that like started in any other spot than just my insanity, which I'm so sorry to everyone for. But I will have
writing the bass line and stuff.
No. Everybody writes their parts. That's such an important part.
Right.
Like
What
people.
he's saying, though, is that the songs come from him being crazy and like.
So I will demo out, whether I physically record it or not. I'll demo out the entire song, and just my parts. Sometimes I'll vocalize synth lines a lot, and will have in my head my idea for the way things will go, but I'll never show anybody like what my idea for the drum will be or what my idea for the bass would be. I'll show the synth because Jade and I are so collaborative on a day-to-day basis on like how those like keyboard parts and that such will go. But there's multiple ways that I could bring a song to the band. A lot of times we'll just be in the middle of a practice and I'll just start playing a part that they haven't heard before. They have no idea if I'm just fucking around or if this is legitimately a song. Half of the time they just ignore me and wait for me to play the next song so they don't have to deal with it. Half the time they just start playing to it and we end up writing the song. I always prefer the latter because if they do just ignore it, or like Nick goes into like blast beats as a joke, I will be so humiliated that I'll never play the song again. And I'll just hide it. Or sometimes delete it because I'm crazy. But I write so many songs every day. Like, I wrote a song this morning. We're working on album 2 right now. Like, we're going to start demoing next week.
Yeah.
Like, we don't get a break. But that's just how it is. Sometimes I'll like legitimately be like, there's a song that I want you guys to work on, or I'll sit there and I'll play the entire song for them just like on guitar and vocals, and so often they come up with parts that are so similar to what I was thinking, and sometimes they come up with parts that are the exact opposite, and it's so much better than what I was thinking. And collaboration is so important to the musical process. I've recorded a solo album before. That was some boring shit. This is good. I like this because there are parts that aren't mine. these are really good musicians, and if I like started going, hey, you should really do this. Okay, so every once in a while that's fine, and sometimes I'll have ideas that are like important to the song, like, hey, I like what's happening here, but this would be beneficial, or and I'll like nudge things in a direction. But if you have a band and you're not letting your really great musicians just run with ideas and then adapting to them, I feel like our songs get written 3 times before they've even been recorded, because I'll have a version of it, then there's the work in progress while we're working on things, and sometimes I'll rewrite my parts to match what they are writing, and sometimes they'll rewrite their parts to match what I already did, and we'll meet some middle ground, and there's varying levels of that all throughout the album. But I will say that 99.9% of the time, the song starts with me by myself, and I bring it in some form to the band, whether they know that's what I'm doing or not, because I don't like to explain what I'm doing usually. Because I think that the reactions are a lot more off the cuff then. But this was one of those songs where they started, and it was exactly what was in the dream, and I kind of freaked out. And it still freaks me out. This song weirds me out. I swear I stole this song. And then they also stole this song. Yeah, it's not possible, but I can't like get it out of my head. So yeah, speak softly.
Turned out on this album.
Yeah, the drums were the base of everything. So if the drums were not working for us, nothing else was working. Drums are so crucial, and we recorded in a garage. Like we recorded this whole thing in a garage, mixed it in a garage, ourselves, everything, our equipment, our investment. I mean, this has been such a personal affair. I mean, like, it's just us. Then we had an engineer friend of mine that has been with us since the original Steadyfire EP come and help record vocals on 2 different occasions. And we did a 12-hour session and recorded all the vocals for the whole album except for 2 songs. And then he got stuck in a cornfield at 2 in the morning.
Yikes.
So I started my day at 3 in the morning. I got up and started working on music, and ended my day 5 the following morning.
Do my best to let a love you know. This distance doesn't lead to home. I watch life reflect from the overpass and try to fend off future heart attacks. There's some things that just don't come back. If some things never change, then why aren't we the same? You're never gonna get a chance like this again. Let go, leave before the end. Speak softly into the palms of your hands. You can feel it once but never again.
This is a cool sort of breakdown part that I really like. That's sort of like,
Thank you.
yeah, you bet.
Yeah, I like it. It's a really good variation.
Yeah, it sort of helps keep your
Yeah, it
ear
keeps the flow
stimulated,
going.
if
Yeah.
you will, yeah.
Breaks
I
up the
really like
monotony.
the bridge. The bridge of the song is probably like my favorite part of the entire song.
Why is that?
I'm not sure exactly. I think it's just the way it sounds to me. The combination of notes is just unique, I guess, to me.
This is originally how the song started.
Okay.
So the point of coming out of that bridge and going straight back into the intro, we would repeat the entire beginning of the song. And then when I was working on the album's flow, I'd cut it straight to the bridge so that it could come out and go better. So you can hear that drum beat. That's how the song started. I wanted a guitar solo, but I didn't want to take a break for one, so it kind of just plays in the background right here.
This is also example of what he was saying. He vocalizes the synth lines, so like this, and even if he's like goes, here's a thing, and I want to play it on the synth, and so that's why those O's are going. It's a synth line too. I play the synth during it. Jesus.
And there were actually a decent amount of things that happened album specific for me that were accidents, because when we recorded everything initially, I didn't have any backing tracks to go off of. It was primarily just a metronome and be like, all right, let's hope you remember where all the changes are.
Especially like having only played the song one day or so.
Yeah.
That happened a lot. So
So
we were like writing the songs and then immediately going into recording them, and like the pressure was definitely on Nick to remember what we did.
And initially, after we come back out of that, like after we go into that breakdown and then go back into the original intro of that song specifically, and then we go back into like the bridge, I go into the halftime, kind of like the breakdown thing, again, 2 measures before everyone else does.
Gotcha.
That was an accident because
We liked it too much.
Yeah.
I like happy accidents. Happy accidents
And
happen
it's
to me all the time.
Because
with
of
my band.
and because of the way we recorded the album and kept redoing things and kept those accents would just keep sticking. They would just become the changes. So I mean, at some point, like if anybody cares, in 10 years I'll release every version of this album. I kept all those files. I've got the early mixes. It's ridiculous how much changed, and kind of crazy how much stayed the same throughout the whole process.
There is a
certain things.
door slamming in the album, and you cannot tell that it is a door slam.
Yeah, it's in How Often Have I Been This Wrong. There's
Just
this
sounds like a percussion.
Yeah, there's this door slam really low in the mix, tons of reverb, and it's just this kind of low boom. And bless you. And it was kind of symbolic for me because of the album artwork and that door, and I that's all very, because like every kind of aspect of the album I had my hands on, like I had a vision for it, and I think we achieved that. And then through collaboration, we reached something even greater than that, maybe like initial goal. But
So
however that went, yeah, there's a door, and the reason the door happened was because I was working on mixing, but a mic was on, and I'm sitting there because we're kind of like mixing as we record certain parts, so we can decide like, does this need more? Do we need to add more parts to fill out this space? And Nick was going to walk outside. Garrett was already outside. I can't remember, were you going to smoke or going to something? Garrett was outside already.
I honestly think we were both going out there to pee.
Yeah, I think that was what was happening, but I had to stop.
Normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had to stop what I was doing so that they could do that. And then I turned on the mic and I had Nick stop, and then I told him to just slam the door. So from the other end of the room, I have this just mic pointing wherever it's pointing on. Probably one of his drum mics. I think it was like the left overhead, because we had those on.
Probably.
And he just slammed the door, and I took it, moved it, and put it where I wanted it. And I mean, we can listen to the song "How Often Have I Been This Wrong" at some point, and like point out where that happens. But it's at the very beginning of the second verse, coming out of the first chorus.
Okay, cool. Would you like to just move into that one right now?
Sure.
All right.
And I'm the one deserving of scorn. There was on a morning that I didn't wake up for. I have had dreams that have died in my thoughts. I can't for a moment pretend it's anyone is full. What I've imparted is but a means to make amends. While I try to make room to get this off my chest. There used to be joy here till it left along with the rest. My memory of history is revisionist at best. How often have we been this wrong? How often have we been this wrong? You don't have to keep playing along. How often have we been this wrong? Are we still dreaming? Are we protecting off the
Gotcha.
map?
I heard it.
Directing others to the place we got off track. And are we still
So,
meaning,
this is the title
or
track
is
of
the
your
light
album.
Yes.
What, I mean, I'm assuming that, well, I guess I'm not really assuming, I'm just sort of hoping now that I'm talking about it, that you sort of wrote this song early on enough to make you want to write an album about this whole idea of being incorrect about stuff? Or can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, the title goes all the way back to that like EP that I canceled that I was telling you about. And actually, this song was the last thing relating to this title that happened. Like when I told the guys that I wanted to make this album, before we even started like recording it, or like working on it in earnest, like we kind of wrote some songs for it accidentally, but before we did it like really intentionally, I messaged them and told them I want to make an album. This is what I'm thinking of calling it. And I wrote this song. It was like one of the last things that happened to tie everything together. So I got to write this song with hindsight of what the rest of the album was like, and kind of got to put all the experience and all the emotion about it into it, and got to write a song intentionally to be the climax of everything.
Okay, very cool. And so, I mean, I guess obviously this was going to be the title track the whole way through.
Yeah, because I wrote it specifically to be the title track.
Sure. Okay.
I wrote it, you know, it was kind of like there was a gap on the track list, and it's like, and I still have to write the title track. And I'm lucky it worked.
Yeah, definitely.
But I will do that. I'll write a song for a role. Like Fragments was originally written years ago to be an opener. And like we as a band went and spent a lot of time rewriting that song to work as a closer. And I wrote The Moment of Impact specifically to be an opener for this album. Like things were made with an intention.
Very cool.
So that it would flow and matter.
Also, like going back to what we were talking about earlier about how everything is like how everything happened in like this quick kind of motion. There are several times, I think like almost every band practice, we have to pull up a song because somebody doesn't remember how something goes because they were like created and recorded in like these sessions. There were songs like when I joined that they hadn't played for like months. They just like hadn't even touched them. They didn't know how they went. And like we just played one of the newest song on the album, Everything, like as a band like 2 practices ago, because we just recorded all the parts and then it was like there to mix. And so like I have a lot of harmonies in the songs and I always have to go back and I have to bring them up because it's been just like we recorded everything and it's all done, and so there's so much time in between. I'm like, oh yeah, how does this part go? Because I wrote it at the microphone and then didn't really have time to think about it, so it was like a...
Does that make performing live difficult?
No, because once I listen to like once we're like in practice and we get everything and we're practicing, like everything's fine. There's just like small moments, and like Gavin is really smooth, so if he forgets like his lyrics, he just like makes new ones and no one even knows. Like he does it all the time. I'm like, are those the lyrics? And he's like, nope.
Well, that helps when no one knows the lyrics.
Oh man,
Yeah.
we are just good at recovery too, though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we make
As
a
a
lot
whole.
of mistakes that just... We make a lot of mistakes that kind of just get reworked into the song. I mean, it happens as a band that plays with as much energy as we have, and now with this whole album material and then kind of like a little bit of a back catalog going back a couple of years, there's plenty of room to mess up, and we are good enough at looking at each other and realizing where we are and where we can go with it, that we've never had an instance where we didn't get through a song in a live setting. We just change it.
Gotcha.
Because a lot of the times that's how we wrote it to begin with. I mean, that's how we write songs. And I have this kind of philosophy we were talking earlier about how I bring songs to the band and then write them. And my philosophy is simply that I write the song in its bare bones, I bring it to the band, and whether they have an idea of what to play or not, we play it, and we just keep playing the same thing in the cycle. I have this thought
into our bodies.
Yeah, and I have this thought and this idea that creative people a lot of times make creative things because they're bored, because they want something new. And when you're playing the same thing over and over again, eventually, like out of desperation, your brain will make something that you can do differently, so that you're not just playing that same thing over and over again. And that's when the song reaches that's how the next change happens, and that's how you you write a chorus, or you write
That's
a
how
melody.
That's how Even If got its bass line.
Yeah, it's just you just play and you play and you play, and eventually you will come up with something better than what you were playing before, or at least different than what you were playing before. And it has worked so far. That is my writing philosophy, and that's how I write melodies, catchy melodies. Is I'll get bored and I will just start humming something, and I always vocalize melodies like synth lines. Like I always wished that I could play guitar and synth at the same time, because like I've had the synth that she plays for years, and I've been writing on it for years, and now she gets to take all the credit. But it's perfect because now she's writing synth lines that are better than what I was writing to begin with. So she is very much one of the things that I think turned like a new leaf with the album. At the halfway mark, we had a version, and then because we had all done it before, we got to do it better the second time, and then she got to bring a whole new thing to it. I don't know. It's great.
Yeah. There were several synth lines that he had like very plainly explained to me, but not in detail. So he'd be like, here are the notes, and it goes like this. And I'm like, okay. So when we went to re-record everything and I had to record the synth lines, I was like, oh, that's not what I've been playing. He was like, well, that's the synth line. I'm like, well, I've been playing something different at all of our shows. And because they fit so well, like people don't notice. Like it still goes in the song, but I obviously changed some of them. One of them, I think it was not even if it was the Speak Softly one, he let me keep the way that I play it because that's how I played all the time. But
there was a one note difference.
Yeah, but the Like Before one, he just had me change that one because it sounded better the other way. But because I have an understanding of how music works, because I play piano and the guitar and ukulele and things like that, I just was making things that made sense in the scheme of the music, even if it wasn't what Gavin had told me,
which was the point.
He was scrambling to tell me things and also get all the practice put together. So there were just times when I had the minimum amount of information, and I was like, well, I will create a thing then, because I don't want to not play anything.
Gotcha. So what are the plans for 2019? Is there a tour?
There's going to be a lot. So the immediate thing that needs to happen is this boy needs to get surgery.
Yeah, we talked about the leg last time you were on the show. How's it going?
It's pretty good. ACL is still snapped, waiting on workers' comp and all that stuff to get the paperwork pushed through so I can actually get the surgery. But as far as I know, the bone is mostly healed at this point. So.
Well, that's good, I guess.
But
Yeah.
he did record the whole album like
With
that.
a broken leg, so.
Trooper.
And it definitely was a detriment. I mean, like when he had to like re-record parts, I mean, like sometimes there would be breaks where it was just like, and now Nick can't walk. So I mean, like it's definitely not that like it's not a serious injury. It's a really serious injury. I don't know how he got through it with a lot of the parts he plays, and this whole thing was a labor of love, and we're already working on the next one. I can't wrap my head around it. We're crazy.
You're working on the next album already?
Yeah, so it's like because we like get stuck into this like cycle of like working like this. Like the first week of us like taking a break off, it's like, man, this sucks.
Yeah.
We got to do more stuff. So we're demoing new tracks next week. So the week that this goes live, we're probably going to be at the moment it goes live working on things. We have a show. So the release party for the album would have already happened. We're working on booking some shows. Then he's got to get surgery so that he can actually get that fixed. And then, we're kind of stuck for that period of time that he is recovering. I want to keep writing and working on things, but we can't play shows for that amount of time. So whether we go do like Steadyfire acoustic sets places or, we're going to keep this music going. Right after an album release is a bad time to not be able to play shows. But summer, late spring, and then through summer, through the rest of the year, we're going to be recording. Whoops! We're going to be touring. I didn't mean to say we'd be recording, but we will be recording. We will be recording. We already have the producer. We're already working with a producer on the next album.
Okay.
He's Yep, not saying anything.
Right, cool. Well, so this
not small.
This album will be released on January 4th, which means by the time you're listening to this amazingly easy and unchallenging to record podcast, we've had several technical difficulties throughout this podcast. It'll be already available. Where can people find it?
People can find it on Spotify, Apple Music, iTunes, Google Play. Bandcamp is going to be great just because, if you don't want to stream the album, or if you do want to stream the album but you want to directly help the band, buying the album on Bandcamp is going to be such an incredible thing because it's been available for pre-order. That's the only spot that it has been. You get the album. You can like pay what you want. So for the pre-order, it was like $7 to pre-order. But then like you can pay more if you want, which I've like been shocked seeing people pay more.
Right. It's always sort of nice is such a boring word, but that's always nice.
It is nice, and we get to keep the majority of that. Buying the album on any other digital platform, the majority of it doesn't go to us. We own our own label. Again, we ran our own studio for this album. We have the equipment, so we can record other people, and people have asked. We run our own merch store. We book our own tours. She designs merch. She's an artist. She went to Capital University for 2 years for art education, and now she's going to LA Film School for music production. So literally, she's like everybody in the band has multiple roles. She's in charge of our shipping orders. Nick's going to be working on our touring van. Garrett is just sexy as hell.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Garrett actually did a lot more than playing bass on the album. So both.
Did a lot of guitar work.
Yeah,
too.
Garrett did a lot of guitar work. He did the riff and the song, everything he wrote. So like him and I worked together a lot on guitar
It was
parts.
like the entire like all the leads to everything I wrote.
Yeah, everything the song, not the whole album, but all the lead parts on
yeah.
everything he wrote. And it was just amazing. Again, like everybody. Nick and Garrett both had experience in the DAW that we recorded the album in, so I was able to like get up off of where I was, and like we were able to like kind of take over the producer's chair for a second. So it was this very collaborative process, and we all have so many different roles in the band. I think I might have 93. I have so many different. Yes, I think I have so many different full-time jobs in this band. It's really impossible. Social media is one of the hardest ones, but it's the one that I have the most experience in. And things are moving. People, we're actually like, in terms of like our followers and like likes on Facebook and followers on Twitter, it's like over the last week, it's just been like jumping.
Yeah, I saw
like-
that on Facebook. You guys are more than 1,500, I think.
We're
I
a
don't
little
remember
under
what you
that,
were.
but I would say like within the next couple weeks we might be there. Like that's what data is showing me.
Okay.
And then it's just gonna keep going.
Was it Twitter? We got like 30 new.
Yeah, so we
followers,
did
in a day.
We did an interview yesterday, and like over the course of doing the interview, it was on radio. Like I took my phone was like buzzing the whole time, just new notifications, and so like stuff is like moving faster than we really know how to deal with, and the fact that like. We're being referred to as an established band, and like when we did this the first time, and like people were referring to us as what like one of the bigger indie bands in the state, and like we have so many like I don't know quote unquote fans, but like people that are really dedicated to our music talking about it online. I find discussions that don't involve me.
Is that weird or is that
It's
awesome?
so weird, but of course it's awesome. But you have to be appreciative of that, because it's like that's what I've been doing my whole life. I've been talking about music to people online, and now it's like a lot of these like same places I would frequent to talk about music. It's like I'm walking into conversations about my music.
Do you ever just be like, you're talking about me? What's up?
I listen. I
That would
only.
be brilliant.
I almost only ever join in if somebody is saying they don't like it, and I'll agree with them.
Oh no.
Like, they're like, man, that
No.
vocalist isn't good. And I'm like, yeah, he sucks.
Is it like your name though as the username, or is it like Flying
like
Dragon?
happens on Facebook a lot. Happens on like Facebook groups
Okay.
a lot. I'm the admin of a bunch of music groups, so it's like I've just like worked my way into this spot for a long time. I guess we're getting really well known in like the like indie emo scene. Like and now like on Wikipedia we're called an emo revival band, and then if you go to the emo revival Wikipedia, we're listed
Yeah,
as
that
one
blew
of
my
the as
mind.
one of the like leading emo revival bands. I'm like, I don't know who did this. I don't know why people are like this.
He said, but I'm not gonna not take that.
It was one of those
label,
things where it's
thank
like
you.
I didn't know I was emo, but I guess I do cry a lot.
Well,
And I guess our music does have the characteristics of that now that I've like looked into it. So it's just such an interesting thing. We've like the people that are grabbing on to this stuff. I'm so for on the podcast, I'm not supposed to say this, but when we're recording the podcast, the album is coming out tonight, and I have to mention it just because it won't make sense if it came out last week. I'm horrified. I've been this mess of nerves, but what I've tried to do has been a really public, horrified mess of nerves.
gotcha.
I think we're being signaled to end.
We are, which is too bad
cute,
because we've had a ton of
but
fun.
it has been fun. But
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll do this again.
Yeah.
Because technical difficulties do not scare us.
Good.
That was the whole album. I think we lost entire songs sometimes, and I had to like
Yeah.
call them and
Yeah.
be like, that really good take you did? It's gone. It's gone.
Yeah. Gotcha.
I guess that's all we have time for today. So
Yeah,
thank you so
absolutely.
much for having us.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the show. It's always an absolute pleasure to talk with you all. I always feel like I learn so much about music and doing bands and stuff. So I really appreciate you guys coming on the open mic.
Next time you have us, we need to talk about other people's music.
Okay, sounds good.
Oh, that
Well,
would be fun.
yeah.
But thank you so much.
You bet.
Begun to feel an ocean start to form in my emotion. Time has come to grab and lead us back to dust. To everyone who saw the message, it's over now. You've made your passage, lay down and feel the present wash over us.